Our senses cannot know anything at all. They are but electric waves of two-way light and can but sense. But mind can know everything which lies within and beyond the range of sensing. It is our knowing which will complete the range of the whole cycle for us, of which our senses can record so very little. Knowledge alone will answer the long unanswered questions, and we have not had sufficient knowledge to answer them until this electric age made it possible to see behind the illusions of motion and know the whole range of God's creating processes. During our unfolding eons, our senses have told us that our bodies are ourselves, and that we are many separate beings who live and die. Our senses have also told us that matter and motion are real, and that the evidence of our senses is our sole reliance. Until very recently, one would not have understood if told that his body of matter in motion had no reality whatsoever, that it was pure illusion of seeming motion, and that the illusion belonged equally to the visible and invisible universes. It is quite strange that people do not yet know that matter and space are equal and opposite mates, which continually interchange, that which is matter becoming space, and that which is space becoming matter, and that this interchange repeats itself forever and forever. It never ceases except to our senses, which record seeming beginnings and endings, which we call birth and death. The time has come when we must know that there is a continuity between deaths and births, which has its own unfoldings, just as there is a continuity between births and deaths. Every creating thing lives equally in the visible and invisible universes and interchanges with it constantly. This does not mean people alone. Everything alike in the visible universe interchanges constantly with the invisible universe. The apple, the tree, the flower, and even the planet, sun, and stars of heaven. Everyone knows that we breathe out from our bodies into space, and that we breathe into our bodies from space. But people have never realized just what that means. Every outward breath of man is his death. Part of him dies at every outward breath. The part that dies goes into the invisible universe of the heavens and to the earth. A man cannot sense that part of him which is constantly dying, but a dog can sense it sufficiently to follow these dying particles for days. Now, let us give thought to these dying particles of our body for a moment. We do not grieve and weep because of their deaths, do we? We do not care for them or even give thought to their disappearance, do we? No, of course not. Why? Because we are through with them. They have served their purposes, and we have created other particles to replace them. The only time we weep is when the cycle is finished. Now, let us consider the replaced particles. What are they? They are newly born parts of our body. They have been born to continue the ideal of John Jones or Jane Smith. We give no thought to them, but it is a fact that neither John nor Jane are the same bodies they were a moment ago. Breath and rebirth have transformed them. They are continually being transformed. In this example is an explanation of the processes of nature in continuing John Jones and Jane Smith by forever transforming the forms of their bodies by a repetition of sequential deaths and births from babyhood until old age. During that period of transformation, John and Jane were never the same in appearance and form for even one moment. This transformation never ceases. We think it ceases at its cycle's end because our limited senses cannot reach beyond that seeming end which we call death. Universal continuity. In order to logically build up an understanding of what happens after death of the whole body, Let us consider what happens after the death of parts of the body, which are constantly being thrown off into space. Here is a fact of nature which man has never considered. It has to do with the fact of nature before referred to, that every visible action has its invisible reaction, constituting a two-way flow of all creating things. For every visible forward flow, there is an invisible backward flow. Each of these voids the other. Therefore, nothing actually happens except the deception to our senses. They sense but one way of it, and we call it motion, time, and change. Let us consider what happens in space to void what is happening in the visible universe. As nature unfolds her forms, she simultaneously refolds them in the seed of these forms. As the oak tree unfolds outward toward the heavens, it also refolds inward toward its seed. That is God's plan of recording every action by enfolding the pattern of that action in its seed for repetition. The oak tree is continually being transformed, just as Jane and John and all creating things are being transformed, and we call that transformation growth. Now, what is growth? Actually, it is a series of sequential births and deaths. There are more births than deaths in the first half of any life cycle, and more deaths than births in the last half, but that preponderance is balanced in space by the very opposite until the rebirth of the body from the recorded seed. Another question: what is the seed? The seed is an electrochemical record of the form pattern of an unfolding ideal. That electric record is ultra-microscopic in size and has almost no motion. It is formless, yet in it is the entire pattern of the body of man or oak or whatever ideal it records. The seed is a tomb in which the death of the body it records is buried for resurrection into birth of life. Centering the pattern record is the still light, which is God, from whose imagination the form of that ideal extended in the two lights of his electric thinking to interweave that form into his image. That still light of God, which centers all creating things, is the soul of the ideal, which the patterned form manifests, whether that form be oak tree, violet, man, or planet. For all creating things are centered by soul, just as they are centered by mind. Soul is universal, as mind and thinking of mind are universal. God is the one soul. Soul is desire in God to manifest form of ideal. Soul in the oak is desire to manifest the ideal of the oak. Likewise, soul in man is desire to manifest the ideal of man. Soul is the desire quality in the light, just as truth is the quality of balance. Soul is the fulcrum from which the electric wave of motion extends to express desire in form. The word soul is used to define a quality of the God mind, just as love, truth, balance, and the law are used. Its connotation differs from the connotation of love, but all of the qualities of God are one, even though we have to use different words to express them. If God were without desire to create, the word soul would have no meaning. Soul and creator have practically the same meaning. Many people believe that each man has an individual soul, and also believe that animals and lower forms of life are without souls. God, the Creator, centers every creating thing and extends his desire or love into every creating thing. And that means not only the ideal itself, but each particle of matter which constitutes the body of each ideal. Every corpuscle in the body of man, blade of grass, or atom of iron, is centered by the invisible light of the one soul of the visible universe. Each particle is an extension of